Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Thursday edition of Speaking Moistly. With me today is Dr. Patrick Phillips. Sir, how are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, thanks
Thank,
for having me on, Mark.
yeah, thanks for joining me today. You've been on before, and I appreciate you coming back. We've had, we were just talking in the green room really quick about all of the, I guess, kind of changes since the last time you've been on. Not really
Hmm.
changes, but more solidifying their position. Um, you are in Twitter jail now
Yeah,
too, talking about heart conditions. Now, can
yeah,
we? I've talked on my show about how myocarditis is bad and not really reversible. Is that wrong? Like, is it treatable?
yeah,
It's treatable, but not reversible. Can you explain that just a little bit?
yeah. So myocarditis. To be honest, I've seen like maybe one case in my career, but it's definitely very serious. I would not call in general myocarditis mild. Maybe it's mild in the sense of the spectrum of myocarditis, but you see somebody with myocarditis, I am taking that very seriously. I'm going to be consulting a cardiologist in my town here. I'm getting them out of my town and I'm getting them down to Sudbury where they can be seen by a specialist. Like it's something that we would take very seriously. It's hard to call myocarditis mild. And when
So,
you ask the question of the heart damage,
yeah.
so myocarditis can possibly be mild on that spectrum. But what happens is if it is causing heart damage, so if heart cells are breaking down, those cells do not regenerate. So that's the big problem. You can bring down the inflammation and treat that, but if some of those cells have died, you will not regenerate those cells for the rest of your life. And
Okay.
so what often happens in myocarditis, although you can often recover from it, and some people might be fine, but a large number of patients, eventually their heart muscle becomes weakened, and within a few years, they'll develop heart failure. So it will
Really?
happen later on in the course of it.
And is one
Yeah,
of the treatments for myocarditis an organ transplant?
yes,
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah,
that's why. See, and I don't. So two things. I heard that myocarditis is pretty common, right? Like this is a thing that happens, and we're just hearing about it now
no,
because of the
no,
media playing this. So this
no.
is not something like prior to 2020, you wouldn't have 6 or 7 people come in and be like, man,
No,
the virus caused myocarditis.
no,
No.
that would be extremely rare. It can happen. You can get like a post-viral myocarditis,
Yeah.
but I've never seen that. The only case of myopericarditis, I guess, that I've seen that was serious was related to the vaccine, the COVID
In,
vaccine.
Interesting. And so, okay, well, I mean, that's something that's not great. A lot of the time I'm hoping that I'm wrong. A lot of the
Yeah,
time I'm hoping like, okay, I heard this, but I hope that that's misinformation or it's like an interpretation that's not quite right. The other thing, I've never experienced this before, but I'm not a soccer fan or a football fan. But the other day on my show, I had a list of probably 20 people who have like either died of a heart attack,
yeah,
collapsed on the field due to myocarditis, pericarditis, or heart attack,
mhm,
or collapsed after a run or a game or something to that effect. So, and again, I talked to a different friend of mine and I said, could you make this chart from a different year? Like, give me this chart from
mhm,
2016. Let's see all the people who just randomly passed out and died of a heart attack after playing high level football. You'd think they weed those
yeah,
people out, right? Like that doesn't happen.
yeah,
So it's it's really jarring to see so many people affected and have the public health seeming like blinders on. They're not interested in it. If you tell
yeah.
them, I mean, well, you've got firsthand experience about speaking out against this. Is there anything that is going? Is there any updates that you can give us on what's going on with your situation?
Yeah, so my situation is kind of complex. The college is like they have multiple cases against me. So my next deadline where they're going to decide if they're going to put more restrictions on me or suspend me is going to be on November 12th. Additionally, actually, the CPSO is looking to kind of put a gag order on me to prevent me from speaking about my cases. So we have a
Interesting.
court date on January 7th where they want to get a publication ban on my cases. They
Hmm.
want to prevent me from naming any names or from being able to discuss my cases publicly. Although they continue to release their own press releases on my cases, right, calling me
That's
dishonorable and all that, but they don't want me to be able to to speak about them or defend myself. And
yeah.
I'm not talking here about releasing patient identifiable patient information. I have no complaints from patients.
Yeah.
These are only complaints from other health professionals or
Or the public, I guess.
right? Yeah, people
Yeah.
who take offense to what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Have you heard of Dr. Dr. Killian? You've heard of
Yeah.
her through the, so you can't give, according to the CPSO and what I saw online, you can't sign a mask exemption or a vax exemption.
Yeah.
That's been stripped, but you can still practice medicine.
Yes. Yeah.
So they're looking at doing the same to you that they've done to Dr. Killian.
Possibly.
Wow.
All they've told us is that that's on the possible sanctions they could put on me. And this is around this next case is actually around my freedom of speech issues. So about my tweets and interviews, right?
Yeah.
So so it's interesting. They're coming down hard. And they just released a press release as well, saying they're taking 4 other physicians to court around these mask exemption issues. So they're hammering hard.
They're creating
they don't like dissent.
They're creating their own cohort of people who are disagreeing, but it's very interesting that they're trying to continue to put their own version of things and trying to silence you and the other people who are bringing this up. And it's not like they're trying to silence you because, well, they're trying to say that what you're doing is bad for some reason, and I'll let them articulate their argument. But I think that it's interesting that, we've had news media say things that have ended up being completely false, completely fake. And again, it's like blinders. If you say like, look at Uttar Pradesh in India, right? Like, here, look at that. They won't look at you. So it's very, it's very jarring to have, and I don't think Canadians understand what's going on. Like, it's very difficult, and even more difficult as well if they're trying to go after your free speech, to understand the impacts of, and the chilling kind of nature of the threat. Like, we could remove your livelihood, right? But we're not doing it yet. It's like this Damascus sword above you, right? We're not doing it yet, but we could at any moment. Yeah. So that's chilling. And then as well saying, these are the things that we don't like. That's chilling. It's so, it's so scary. Has your hospital, shifting gears a little bit, has your hospital or people that you know or have heard happy about Doug Ford's announcement, or is it a whole bunch of bullshit? Doug Ford's announcement that no vaccine mandates. Like, didn't everybody mandate the vaccine anyway already? Like, hasn't this been done?
Yeah, it's an interesting tactic that they're using. So my hospital in particular, actually, they did not mandate the vaccine. Okay. They did mandate the coerced testing protocols for the people who don't get the vaccine. So it's still discriminatory. There's punishments, right, for not getting the vaccine. Yeah. And especially in my town, where you have to travel almost like 40 minutes north to go get that test 3 times a week, right? And then travel back on your own time. So the nurses, it's coercive. And I know nurses that, because of that coercive policy, ended up getting vaccinated. Wow. So it is, they have a vaccine policy in place, but they're not firing staff for not having it here. So they might be relieved by that, because they're not going to lose those nurses. It is hard to recruit healthcare providers up here. But I don't know what they feel, because they've kind of cut me off from the whole communication process. They put my privileges under probation, kind of basically saying they didn't remove them. They just said, we're not renewing them, but you can still practice pending your statements on COVID-19. It was very vague. I asked for further clarification. They didn't give it. So I'm kind of in a limbo position with my hospital right now. That's
that's unfortunate to hear. Yeah. It's so interesting. If we were in a different position, like if I was in a position where I owned a company and I had a secretary and I was like, listen, this is my policy, is this, and we've got to stick this in you. And if you choose not to get this thing, well, you're going to get fired. But it's not me making eyes. This is the policy, right? And it's like, it's so dishonest. Like, we have these rules, we have these rights that are supposed to be inherent, that the government is supposed to protect. That's their job. Their job isn't to keep me safe. If their job was to keep me safe, they'd be like, we're selling alcohol in quantities that can kill you. If you drink all of this vodka, you could die, right? Like, why aren't they dealing with that, right? The cigarettes that they sell, that could kill me, right? Much faster than COVID. And so like, it seems like their responsibility is not to keep me safe, but to extract taxes from me and kill me slowly with vodka and cigarettes. Yeah. Right. And it seems like out of step. So I don't understand. Well, and maybe I'm just complaining to somebody who's being buffeted in the same way, but in a different vocation, right? Like I'm on the internet and I'm not allowed on YouTube. You're a doctor in the middle of a pandemic and they're like, we're not sure about this. It's so maddening because it's all dishonest. It's so dishonest. I don't know the pathway. I don't know the pathway forward. I wish that there was something obvious. And I feel like maybe it'll make itself apparent. Have you heard of these Ezra healthcare places in BC?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. And there's a lot of groups that are organizing in Ontario to do the same thing. They're all kind of preliminary at this point. I've gone to a meeting online, I guess, about possibly setting some of these up. So I'm interested. I'm not really running anything or doing it myself, but I might be associated with some of them here in Ontario. So there's quite a few groups that have popped up. There's all these people, like you said, they've lost their jobs. They have been fired. And it's interesting the way that the government uses tactics to enforce compliance without legally enforcing compliance, right? So if you look at Ontario, they put in this Directive 6 that says you should institute a vaccine policy, but you don't have to mandate the vaccine. They put it down in the lower levels to make them responsible for it. So your boss is the one responsible. And then they actually, just when a deadline is coming up, if you look at Quebec, right, where they push the deadline back, and then they get that extra few people to get vaccinated against their will because they don't want to lose their job before the deadline, right? Because they had to be fully vaccinated by that deadline. So all those people were already coerced. And then just as the deadline comes up, they push it back and then get rid of it and be like, oh, look, we did, like, they wipe their hands of it, right? And be like, we didn't force you to get the vaccine. There was no legal mandate. We got rid of it by the time it came up. But all those people were actually still coerced by that policy because they would have lost their job if they didn't get vaccinated 4 weeks before that. Right. So they were still coerced by that policy, but legally they can claim, we did, like, you did it to yourself. We didn't make you do it.
Right? And it's that kind of, you get 50% compliance, and then you've got enough compliance to say, wow, we're gonna do it the whole way. And it's a game. It becomes a game of chicken. It becomes a game of who's going to blink first. And in the Quebec case, the 8,000 healthcare workers were basically like, no, we're not doing this. But in BC, they failed, right? Like the 3,000 odd workers, they were fired. Quebec and BC went with the postponing operations and surgeries and things. I think that it is very interesting. I saw today that they had 25, Christine Elliott said 25% of people in Ontario, 1 in 4, are not fully vaccinated. So 1 in 4 people have lost access to society, right? Like, but 75% of people are okay with that. And the thing that really is the crux of it for me, so like 90% of people in Guelph are vaccinated. How can that possibly be such a big failure? How can we be looking at that and going, that 9.82% that we didn't get, those people are making our healthcare bad. And the fact that people are willing to go with that is, I'm like, what happened?
Well, and I think the thing is too, that they're ramping up so hard because when you kind of wake up to the fact that this has really nothing to do with health, these vaccines do not promote health, they make people unhealthy. And because they're not even promoting, like you said before, like things that actually make you healthy, like having a low carb diet, intermittent fasting, exercise, vitamin D, all the zinc, like those actually have been shown in clinical research to reduce your risks of being hospitalized from COVID. And so they don't care about health. But when you kind of wake up to that, so then why are they pushing these vaccines, and why are they trying to coerce the rest of them and vilify the rest of them? And it's because who are those 10%? there are people who think independently, you know, and I'm not saying the other people don't too, because there's a lot of people that were forced into it. There are a lot of people who got 2 doses who aren't going to get another. But in general, those 10% are the people who aren't going to obey, go along with tyranny, just blindly do whatever the government tells them, even when they're forced to. So they're a big threat to this regime, right? If there's anybody that's going to stand up against them, it's going to be these people. So that's why the vilification of the unvaccinated is so strong, is because we're a threat. Right.
We could tip it over, maybe. But the thing is, I think they're tipping it over themselves. Like you said, a lot of people who got 2 doses won't get a third. And but see, I feel like they're going to do the same game of chicken, right? They're going to be like, we're going to mandate it. We're going to do the same. You're going to become unvaccinated, get your booster. And then as soon as they get 50%, it's going to be like, it's the same push and pull. And did you see the Waves of Fear video? I think you may have even shared it with me. There was a after school spelled SKOOL. And they did it.
The one on mass psychosis?
The mass psychosis. And in the middle of that video, there's the waves of fear. And so like the wave of fear, the depth of it, like how much more back to normal it seems is indicative of how bad the next wave of fear is going to be, right? So a lot of people think that we're going into another lockdown. And I don't, who knows? At this point in time, I think we're a cork in a stream. Like we're not getting out by ourselves. We're along for the ride now. So if there's another lockdown, well, I don't know what you can do about it, but other than endure it. But a lot of people think that, and it's like I feel like there's so much momentum behind whatever's happening that even if we point it out and say like, this emperor, he is naked as a jaybird, nobody's going to care, right? And not nobody's going to care, but say like, what do we do? What do we do about this, right? So I don't know. I get frustrated at my local municipal people, and I'm like, you are the people who should be standing up to this. You're the people who should. And I mean, like, I think you're a hero, man. Like for speaking out and putting yourself on the line, because that is what you're doing. You're one of the few, and you're not even an elected official. You just decided to be a doctor. You decided to go through that training. You decided to do all that. And then you found yourself in a situation where you're like, this is wrong. And you're speaking out. And that is heroic. But not that I demand my public servants to be heroes. But they signed up for that. They signed up to defend the citizens that elected them, to defend their rights. And you're being thrown under the bus by these people. And I'm like, I'm so frustrated. I don't know how to articulate that and not look completely insane. Like it's like,
I think the big thing here though is this needs, like, there's not going to be any change unless it happens from the bottom up. So that's why I'm speaking out as much as I am, to kind of empower people, right? To that there is a lot of power in you taking back your freedom in your own day-to-day life. That's contagious. Right? Like I tell people to turn off the TV, right? That's, even if you're angry and you disagree with it, it has power over you. I love the fact that I never watch a Doug Ford press conference. I haven't watched one in months. I might hear about it like on Twitter or something, right? But I never watch them because it actually gives a lot of power to you. Even if you disagree with it, and even if you're going to defy what he says, like if you're aware of it, it has power. So I don't know what the restrictions are. I just live my life, and it's kind of nice living in a rural area. I go visit my friends, I go visit family, and I still carry out all our normal activities up here. It doesn't really, like, there's not really much to lose out on in a lockdown up here. So it's kind of like, but I'm also just, I don't pay attention to all these restrictions and things like that. And I don't get upset about them. But there's power in that, because now I don't have a worry about going and visiting friends or family. And when you do that, it becomes contagious, and people around you pick up on that. And that's what creates change from the bottom up. And then I find politicians, sometimes you can pressure them into things, but for the most part, they're going to reflect what the general population is doing. And so I think what you're doing as well, right? By freedom of speech, by putting your values out there, but it's contagious, and it will eventually reach a breaking point. Sometimes it looks like you're not having any difference at all, but then every once in a while you'll reach a breaking point, and then there's a shift. And so I think, yeah, I have no hope in politicians changing this around. This will come from the people eventually. And the question is, what's people's line, right? How bad does it need to get before they wake up?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
interested. A lot of people are talking about as well, power outage. Have you heard the solar
mm,
storm, the internet
yeah. The
going
mainstream
down?
media's, yeah, yeah. I've been like drawing cash out of the
I
ATM as much
know,
as I
right?
can every day, right? Because they're
Yeah.
like the internet's gonna go down. It's
Yeah.
like right after COP26, right? Like how,
And yeah, Boris
yeah,
Johnson's saying that they're going to go to plan B in the UK is basically a lockdown. So if the
yeah,
UK goes into a lockdown, that's the people saying, because they're pretty open in the UK right now. A friend of mine was saying, I don't last week or 2 weeks ago that, oh, things are going to go back to normal. Don't be so worried about it. And I said, like, you think that the UK, I said Wales, which is right in, like, I've been to Wales a bunch. I have family in the UK. So
okay,
Wales is in like lockdown, not
yeah,
lockdown, but they're in like we were last year in the color
yeah,
codes, and they have all sorts of
yeah,
stuff. And they've got mask mandates and all sorts. But the UK itself, like England, Central, doesn't have these things. But Wales, Scotland, they've got that.
yeah,
So everybody thinks the Vax Pass is coming in Wales or in UK, and back to masking and stuff. So people I think are not spoiling for a fight, but people are done with this in a way
yeah,
that they have in a way that I haven't experienced in the last 18 months. I don't think, like when
yeah,
you were talking about it's contagious. So I go to Walmart, I go to stores, and I don't wear a mask.
hmm,
And it used to be that people would give me a hard time, like the people coming in, but now they smile at me, and they actually know
yeah,
me because they know my face, and I'm one of the few. But
yeah,
now I'm starting to see other people in the bigger stores without masks,
yeah,
kids without masks, more and
yeah,
more. Like
yeah,
I take my kids to the toy store sometimes, and that's Walmart just because it's close. And there was a family, and the dad was wearing his mask badly, like it was like around
mm,
his chin, and you could see his nose.
yeah,
And all of his kids didn't have any masks, and he was looking around and he saw me, and he looked at his wife and he goes, he just takes it off.
yeah,
He's like,
yeah,
if he's
because
not, I'm not going to do it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, man.
yeah, no,
So
that's what I notice a lot here too. Like a lot of people working in the stores, even they don't even wear
yeah,
masks. So if I see that, I'm like, screw
yeah. Well,
it.
and I
Yeah,
mean,
because I mean, we know they don't work, right? And there's a lot of people, more and more,
yeah,
they all know they don't work, right? But they're doing it as a courtesy or whatever. So as soon as I think there's a lot of people walking around like that, wearing masks, knowing they don't work. All it takes is for them to see somebody else not wearing one, and they're gonna be like, yeah, I'm not doing this then.
yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It's like the kind of so when I was in school, you and I are kind of a similar age. I went to Ottawa Crescent when I was a kid, and
Mhm.
in my first 3 years, we were doing the Lord's Prayer. So like the Lord's Prayer and O Canada, and then they got rid of the Lord's Prayer, and now they're doing land acknowledgements before everything and O Canada. And so
Yeah.
it's like this weird kind of shift in society. So like you're saying, everybody's walking around with these masks that we know don't work, and
Yeah.
we're practicing in society making these statements that
Mhm.
really invalidate our history, that mean like nothing tangible. What is this?
Yeah.
Saying this every time means what? We're all like,
Yeah.
we're all here, we're all doing, what we do as humans. We're learning, we're growing, we're doing this and that.
Yeah.
But making this land acknowledgement doesn't help, or doesn't meaningfully change anything. Putting this
Yeah.
mask on doesn't meaningfully change. We go through these kind of rituals, customs, and the mask has become a custom to
Yeah.
satisfy other people who might be offended. But
Yeah.
in doing so, we're creating all of this extra like noise that's just
Yeah.
completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
Takes
Yeah.
over.
Yeah, I think some of those things they're guilt tripping. You almost look at like there's a lot of things going on in society that are meant to demoralize population, like having the
Yeah.
flags at half mast
Yes.
for
Yeah.
months,
Yeah.
right? Like
What
that
does
doesn't
that
make any
help?
sense.
Yeah.
Like it
What does
doesn't
that
help
help?
anything. It's
Yeah.
unprecedented, and it's just to demoralize people. And these land acknowledgements too, I'm all for Indigenous rights and treating them with
Sure.
respect, but I've
Yeah.
worked with Indigenous people on reserves.
Mhm.
I mean, those reserves weren't the worst of them, but there's a lot of places that don't have drinking water. What
Yeah.
are we doing land acknowledgements in the city
Right. Thank
while
you.
we're not even
Yes.
giving them drinking water? Like
Yes.
it pays no attention to what their actual needs are
Yeah.
and what they actually want. Do we ask them?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? On the reserves up north, like
Yeah.
what is important to you? I'm
And yeah,
sure
what should we
top of their
focus
list
on?
is not land acknowledgements down in Toronto.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. In the GTA, like
Yeah.
what? And
Yeah.
right. Exactly. It kind of it shows bare when you think about it for 10 seconds. It shows bare what we're unwilling to do. We're willing to shame ourselves, almost like self-flagellation. Every day, we'll do this land acknowledgement. Every day I'll suffocate myself to suffer through this. So you know that I care about you.
Yeah.
But the reality is, if you cared, you would stop playing this stupid game that doesn't actually solve the land acknowledgement doesn't solve the problems that we've caused for the indigenous people, or that we've that have become inherent through the years, and that we've caused, like, this is our land now, right? Like, that's not great, right? Like, that's historically terrible. But saying, we feel bad about that every day at school, that doesn't help. But I often talk on my show about there's a large industrial humidifier you can buy for like between $40,000 and $150,000. Like, it's stupidly cheap, and it creates 550 liters of water per day. Like, it just creates it drinkable, potable water. It's meant to be used for military. It was an ex-military. I talked to the guy who designed it, because I called him and I said, does this thing really work? He said, do you have a dehumidifier in your house? And I said, yeah. He said, yeah, it works just like that, except we purify the water and it's potable. And I was like, how much does one of these things cost? He said, $100,000. And he said, around, he said, like, ballpark figure. He said, depending on the configuration. And I said, that's crazy. I said, has anybody in the Canadian government called you to put them up north in our First Nations? And he said, what? I said, are you kidding? Like, I said, like, I'd like to order 2, but I feel like I need approval for this, like, just to try it out. Like, for the price of sending the delegation to COP22, we could have tried this on 2 or 3 reserves. And then some. Like, all it would have taken was Justin Trudeau to do a couple of Zoom meetings instead of going and virtue signaling in Glasgow. And we could have tried this out. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's a steaming pile of disaster, but then it's a cheap stealing pile of disaster. Like, you spend $1 million, you get 10 of them. Where's the harm? I don't understand. But
no, it's
maybe I'm not
idea.
worldly.
But they don't want solutions, right? They want control.
They want virtue signaling and self-flagellation, and they want to demoralize. And I think it's true about your speech from Twitter. It's true about the CPSO. They don't want solutions. They just want to demoralize and cudgel anybody who doesn't fall in line. It's true of the schools. It's true of the municipalities and the provinces. It's very, but I feel like we're at a point where people can see this. I feel like we're at a point where people are like, hold on a second. Didn't you say the vaccine was going to work? Is this, like, in your medical opinion? So we've kind of gone off the medical stuff, but that's okay. This is how the conversation is supposed to go. But in your medical opinion, is this vaccine profile successful? Like, if somebody said to you, we rolled out this vaccine and these are the results, that a successful rollout to you?
No. So, I mean, there's 2 aspects to that. One is the efficacy, and then the other is the safety. And so when it comes to the efficacy, they have some effect, but now with Delta, it's relatively minimal. It's like something like 39% effective in some places. You look at Israel or Iceland, these other places that have had more vaccine rollout, it's even less effective. It's like something like 30% effective. So it's pretty minimal. We're seeing dramatic rise, especially in those countries, vaccinated people dying from COVID or being hospitalized from it. So the efficacy is not great, not 95%, like they said before. And it might have been 95%, although that's even questionable. There was a whistleblower actually on the Pfizer.
I saw that. BMJ
came out that showed they were falsifying data and covering up adverse events. And but even if it was 95% on the original virus, we now have Delta, which is the majority of the cases now. And so it's not the same thing. And so you're vaccinated for an old virus. So it's not effective, or not near, it is somewhat effective, but not 95%. Then when it comes to safety though.
Is it somewhere in the same, safety, but is it somewhere in the same ballpark as like using last year's flu vaccine for this year's flu? So that doesn't make any sense. Okay. So safety.
And then safety, I mean, unquestionably, it's been a disaster. You look at the US, like I said, they pulled the swine flu. I think we talked about this last time. They pulled the swine flu vaccine off the market in 1976 after 25 to 50 deaths. Reported in their vaccine adverse event reporting system. Now, in 2021, we're not even through the year, there's over 17,000 deaths reported. And there's been an analysis on this data too. They're not just, some people are saying, oh, they're just random. They're just picking up these random deaths. And when you're going to give it to a 95-year-old, you're going to pick up some deaths. But almost like 50% are within the first few days, right? So when you're looking at causality, you want to look, okay, is it happening mostly right after, and then it kind of tapers off, and it does follow that pattern. And I've seen patients deteriorate significantly after these COVID vaccines. So I mean, safety. I mean, there's heart attacks, myocarditis, blood clots, strokes, severe neurological disorders. Like these are all reported in the system and are showing to be caused by the vaccine. And so, to be honest, like the safety system for these vaccines is a disaster. No other pharmaceutical product would ever get away with 17,000 deaths. They wouldn't get away with 50, right? They would get pulled off, and you'd be like, wait, we need to halt this and reevaluate. You don't allow it to keep going with that amount of deaths.
Yeah. Well, in 2009, the swine flu in the UK there was stopped. Their vaccine, I think it was GlaxoSmithKline, had their vaccine stopped for causing narcolepsy. It wasn't even killing people. It was just causing neurological disorders, which if you want to drive and like be in the modern world, having narcolepsy is a bad thing, right? So these kids were getting narcolepsy and they had to stop that. But I heard the same thing about the VAERS database, because I was using it and people were saying, oh, well, anybody could just put anything in there. And I said, well, not really. Like it's the CDC's standard. Like it's not just Joe Schmo who was like, I wonder if adverse events. It's not like Snopes. Like
like you have to put the lot number, the dose. You have to, like, most of them are put in by healthcare providers and not actually by the patients themselves. It's also a federal offense to file a false report. So there are a few false reports that got in there, but it's minimal. And the other thing too is, if even 5% of those deaths were actually real and caused by the vaccine, that's still multiple times more than
isn't it?
And it took to take the swine flu vaccine off the market.
Isn't it funny how humans will just kind of dismiss stuff like that? If somebody's like, well, 10% of that is just total like misreporting and lies, you're like, okay, well, if 90% of that is true, that's crazy.
It is. Exactly. Like even 5% is true. That's still crazy.
That's crazy. And it is. And there's so many things. And we didn't even, like, you touched on the blood clots just at what you were talking about there, but we didn't even touch on that. There was a girl who died in Guelph, and she was a university student, and she died of TTP. So and I can't say it, but it's a pulmonary. It's an
thrombocytopenic.
Thank you.
Thrombotic purpura.
See, I would never be able to say it.
It's a.
But this was Israel published a study in June saying that the Pfizer vaccine causes this blood disorder. And then apparently the family had CBC as attack dogs to anybody who was. Randy Hillier put out their story, and the family attacked him. And I was like, apparently the family doesn't understand that there's a correlation. Like there's a correlation here. Like, and even the media people were trying to give me. They tried to ignore me until I just went away. So it's funny. So these blood clotting and all of this other stuff, it just adds to the questions. And it adds to the concerns around, what do we know? What are we being told? And then hearing about your story and using the power of the state and the regulatory bodies to silence you, it casts more doubt on, what we're being told is accurate and true. So it's a very interesting thing to live through. And I'm sorry that you're going through what you're going through, but I appreciate your strength, and I appreciate you doing what you're doing. So thank you. Is there anything else that we didn't kind of touch on that you wanted to mention?
There's just so much going on. I think we've covered quite a bit. Like feel free to invite me back on. If there's anything else you want to discuss.
Certainly. I hope you will come back on. We'll. It seems like every other week. I emailed you. Oh, it was the TPP stuff, the face cancer that we didn't talk about.
Oh yes,
the T cell. The fact that there's a theory out there. Okay, we'll end with this then. So the theory is basically the vaccine reduces your body's ability to fight things like cancer.
So there's some preliminary reports coming out basically showing that COVID vaccines reduce your CD8 positive cell count. And so these are T cells that are part of your immune system that are generally, they basically go and kill cells. So kill cells that are infected with viruses, which is just part of it.
Yeah.
And they will also kill off cancer cells as well. And so they're also responsible for fighting off the vaccine. So when you get the vaccine, you're injected kind of with these lipid nanoparticles that go into your cells and turn them into spike protein factories. And so T cells, so antibodies will kind of go after the spike protein, but they won't stop the factory. So you need the bombers to go in and destroy the factories. So that's what these T cells do. And you're literally injected with trillions of lipid nanoparticles. So these cells are basically going and trying to fight your own body to stop these cells, and we know they spread throughout the body. So one theory, I guess, for why we are seeing a spike in cancer diagnoses after the vaccine is that these cells are now so busy being used up trying to fight off the vaccine that we know produces spike protein for weeks after at least weeks after you get the vaccine. That it exhausts your immune system and impairs your ability to fight off cancers. So if you had a little cancer growing, and all of us probably actually have little cancers all over the place that our immune systems detect and then get rid of. But if our immune system now is impaired because it's fighting off the vaccine, it loses its ability to be able to fight off those cancers. And so what we're seeing is people who probably had some pre-existing little cancers, and then your immune system is no longer able to fight them off. So we are seeing a surge in cancer cases shortly after getting the vaccine.
Interesting. And stuff like that, you'd think that we'd be looking into it and like finding the correlation, seeing if there's a connection back to the vaccine, and people would be upset about that, like public officers chiefs of officers of health or public health would be upset about this, but we don't see any of that. Instead, we see them trying to silence you talking about it, and it's like, what are we hearing here?
I know.
So we'll definitely have you back, and we will try to stay on top of the ever-changing madness that we're experiencing. So final words, where can they find you? Anything that we didn't talk about that you want to say, or where can they find you?
So probably the best place to follow me is on Twitter at Dr. P_MD, so DRP_MD. I'm in Twitter jail right now, so you won't find me there right now, but I'll be back on Sunday. I'm ready to be back in the fight. Yeah.
Fair enough. No backup accounts, eh?
Gotta start a backup account. I gotta look into that. Right now it's just a good break.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, very cool. You can find me at my usual haunts. I won't bore you with it at the end of the day. And hang out for a second. I'll stop the video and we'll hang out in the green room for a minute, okay? For those out there for watching, thank you for watching. Again, this conversation is a part of many conversations that I'm doing to better understand what's happening in our world. And I think the way to do that is to talk to people like Patrick and like the people that I have on here to see what people are actually experiencing. And so hearing about this is valuable. Speaking about it is valuable. It's not illegal. It should be done. It should be done way more than we do. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.